The missing guest. I smiled anyway. By the time their limousine whisked me home, the invoice for the entire celebration was already in their hands. Stay with me until the end and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far the story travels. The elegant strains of Pachelbel's canon floated through the grand ballroom of the Bellamy Hotel as I stepped inside. I'd spent 3 careful hours getting ready, coaxing each pearl button through my pale blue dress with aching fingers. Every month I'd saved a little from my modest pension so I could wear something special for this day. You'll look lovely, Eleanor, I told myself that morning, smoothing a hint of lipstick and pinning my silver hair into a neat bun. At 70, I still took pride in showing up well, especially for family milestones. After months of silence, I was eager to reconnect with them, most of all with Elsie, my only granddaughter. Her invitation had arrived 6 weeks earlier. Formal, distant, but still an invitation. I accepted at once, hoping it might close the gap that had grown between us. The wedding coordinator barely glanced up from her tablet. Name? She asked. Eleanor Walsh, I answered, my voice steady. Grandmother of the bride. She slid a small badge across the counter. Instead of my name, hurried handwriting announced, the missing guest. I hesitated. Excuse me, there must be a mistake. We're on a tight schedule, ma'am, she cut in, already greeting the next arrival. Please find your seat. Ceremony starts in 20 minutes. I pin the label to my dress, each press of my fingers a quiet surrender. Across the room, Elsie glowed in her designer gown, laughter ringing like crystal. My son James stood proudly beside his wife, arm around her waist. Near them, Franklin, the groom, exuded the cool confidence of someone always looking forward, never back. An usher guided me to a chair tucked behind a towering floral arrangement, far from the altar. I settled in, purse in my lap, clutching the wedding gift I'd budgeted for months to give. Is this seat taken? A kind-eyed gentleman introduced himself as Herbert Miller, a family friend. His eyebrows rose when he learned I was the bride's grandmother, hidden in the corner. It's fine, I said with a practiced smile, but it wasn't. From my obstructed view, I caught only fragments of the vows. When the guests rose to applaud the couple, I stood too, brushing away a tear, less of joy, more of quiet resignation. At the reception, my table assignment told the same story. Table 19, the farthest from the bridal party, shared with distant acquaintances and work colleagues. The card labeled it Extended Connections. I watched James deliver his father of the bride's speech, recalling moments I had helped shape. Not once did he mention my name. Later, I approached the head table with my envelope in hand. Elsie, darling, you look beautiful, I said. Oh, Grandma, you made it, she replied. Smile polite but distant. Of course. I wouldn't miss it. A little gift. You can leave it with the other, she said, turning back to her conversation before I could even kiss her cheek. As I placed my envelope among the mountain of extravagant presents, something caught my eye. The wedding planner's clipboard, left unattended for just a moment. Under special arrangements, the seating chart clearly read, Eleanor Walsh. Isolated seating, minimal interaction, as requested by the bride's mother. For a moment, the room tilted around me. All those years, I told myself they were simply busy. Too many obligations, not enough time. I'd made excuses for the missed phone calls, the rushed holiday visits, the forgotten birthdays. But this was no accident. This was planned. Something inside me, something that had bent for decades without breaking, finally snapped. I slipped to a quiet corner near the coat check, trying to steady my breath. Memories came like waves against a worn shore. The day Elsie was born, and I hurried to the hospital with the blanket I'd spent months knitting. The summers she stayed with me while James and Diane struggled to hold their marriage together, drawing pictures at my kitchen table as I baked her favorite chocolate chip cookies. I taught her to read, to garden, to love classical music. I was the one who recognized her gift for art and bought her first set of watercolors. When she won her school art contest at 10, she cried happy tears on my shoulder. Everything shifted when James divorced Diane and married Sandra 3 years later. Sandra came from old money, and suddenly my modest home and simple ways no longer fit. Elsie's visits grew shorter, then rare, then vanished except for a brief holiday appearance. At 65, I sold the house that held every cherished memory, the place where I'd raised James alone after Henry's heart attack at 42. James had been 13 then, and I worked 2 jobs so he could attend college. I sold that home because James said Elsie needed tuition for a prestigious art academy. It's an investment in her future, Mom. This opportunity could change her life, he told me. I believed him. The $175,000 from the sale went straight to her education fund. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment by the highway, calling it cozy, while traffic roared like an endless tide. James promised Sunday visits. They lasted 3 weeks, then once a month, then only holidays, until even Christmas became a 2-hour obligation, with gifts I'd chosen so carefully and never saw her use. Now standing in the corner of the grand ballroom, I felt the truth settle in. I had been quietly erased. Mrs. Walsh? A gentle voice broke my thoughts. An older gentleman in a chauffeur's uniform introduced himself. George Miller. I used to drive for the Hendersons next door to you years ago. I smiled for real. George, what a small world. I work for Elite Limousine now, he said. Assigned to the wedding party tonight. His kind eyes searched mine. Are you all right, Mrs. Walsh? You look upset. Something about his sincere concern pierced my careful composure. Oh, George, I whispered. I don't think I belong here. I showed him my name tag. His expression darkened. That's disgraceful. It's been this way for years, I admitted softly. I just didn't want to see it. George checked his watch. My shift runs until midnight, but I'm free for a while. Would you like a ride home? No charge. I hesitated, glancing back at the reception where the cake cutting was about to begin. Another moment I'd watch from the sidelines. They won't even notice I'm gone, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. George offered his arm. My car is right outside Mrs. Walsh. As we walked through the hotel lobby, I passed the wedding planner, deep in conversation with the hotel manager. A few words floated over the bustle. Final payment due tonight. Bride's parents' card on file. Balance $42,875. I paused. A small idea surfaced, rippling outward. In the limousine settled into the soft leather seat, I asked, George, do you know who's responsible for the wedding bill? The bride's parents arranged everything through Elite, he replied. Mr. James Walsh paid the deposits, but the final contract lists both him and the bride as responsible. I nodded slowly, remembering a Thanksgiving conversation between James and Sandra. Mom's house money covered most of Elsie's tuition, so we had to dip into our savings for this wedding. The pieces slid into place. Thank goodness for those zero-interest credit cards, I murmured. George, I asked carefully, how well do you know the management at the Bellamy? Fairly well, Mrs. Walsh. I've been driving their VIP guests for 7 years. If someone wanted to adjust tonight's payment arrangements, who would they talk to? Through the rear-view mirror, George met my eyes. Are you thinking what I think you're thinking? For the first time all evening, I smiled. A real smile. Not the practice one I'd worn like armor. I'm not sure yet, I said, but I believe I've been absent long enough. Don't you? The next morning, my phone rang insistently. I let it go to voicemail. James's voice filled my small apartment, tight with barely contained anger. Mom, what did you do? The hotel says the final payment was canceled and reassigned. They're billing us for the entire amount. Call me back. I sipped my tea and watched sunlight filter through the curtains. Another call followed. Sandra, her voice sharp and demanding. The night before, after a quiet conversation with George, I'd asked him to drive me to the hotel's billing office. The night manager hesitated until I showed my ID and explained calmly that I wanted to remove the complimentary grandmother contribution from the wedding bill. Family disagreement? He asked discreetly. Family clarification, I replied. My phone rang again, Elsie this time, tearful and pleading. She said Franklin's parents were horrified, their honeymoon was uncertain. How could you do this to me on my special day? I thought of that name tag, of my seat hidden behind the flowers, of the Sundays I'd spent waiting for visits that never came. I lifted my teacup and planned the next chapter of my life, one where I finally mattered to myself. Over the next 3 days, voicemail after voicemail arrived, each more urgent than the last. Mom, we need to talk now. James's commanding tone began to fray. Eleanor, please be reasonable, Sandra said, the edge in her voice betraying real worry. This is becoming embarrassing for everyone. By the 4th day, the messages shifted. Grandma, Elsie said, her voice softer but calculating. We might have to cancel our honeymoon. Is that what you wanted? I sat at my kitchen table, tracing the rim of my teacup. Morning light turned the dust in the air into tiny stars. Outside, a garbage truck beeped rhythmically, a steady counterpoint to my thoughts. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always feel triumphant. What I felt was emptiness and a quiet resolve. The doorbell startled me. Through the peephole, I saw James checking his watch, Sandra beside him, arms crossed. Some habits die hard. I opened the door. Mom, James began without greeting. This has gone far enough. I need to fix this. I stepped aside, letting them in. Their eyes swept over my modest apartment with barely hidden disapproval. Would you like some tea? I asked out of old politeness. We don't have time for tea, Sandra snapped. Do you know what you've done? I settled into my armchair and gestured toward the sofa. James stayed standing, hands jammed in his pockets. I simply clarified the financial arrangements, I said calmly. As the grandmother of the bride, I was expected to contribute, but as the absent grandmother, I felt my contribution should be absent as well. James flushed. What are you talking about? I crossed to the sideboard, retrieved my purse, and placed the wedding night name tag on the coffee table. Sandra's eyes widened before she quickly looked away. James picked it up, confusion creasing his brow. This must have been a mistake, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Was it also a mistake to seat me behind the floral arrangement? I asked quietly. Or when the planner's notes specified minimal interaction with me? Sandra's glance toward James was quick, a silent warning. We didn't, James started. Please don't lie, I interrupted, voice soft but firm. I've had enough lies. Enough promises of Sunday visits that never came. Enough assurances that the money from my house was being well spent. Silence fell heavy. Mom, James said finally, his tone shifting to the one he uses with difficult clients. I understand you're upset, but this is completely disproportionate. The hotel is demanding $42,000 immediately. We don't have that kind of ready cash right now, James said. I sold my house for $175,000, I replied evenly. Every penny went to Elsie's education because you said it was an investment in her future. Where did the rest of the money go, James? He shifted, eyes flicking away. That's not relevant right now. It's completely relevant, I countered. That money was meant for my retirement. Instead, I live here. I gestured to the small apartment, the water stain on the ceiling, the radiator that clanked all winter. While you and Sandra enjoy a 5-bedroom house in Oakwood Hills, and Elsie wears designer clothes and travels through Europe. Sandra rose abruptly. We didn't come here for a financial inquisition. We came to resolve the hotel bill. I looked at her, really looked. This was the woman who had quietly erased me from my son's life, and from my granddaughter's. The hotel situation is already resolved, I said. The contract makes the responsible parties clear. We can't afford this right now, James burst out. The business is in transition, and with the down payment on Elsie and Franklin's condo. He stopped, realizing what he'd revealed. You bought them a condo? I asked, the final piece sliding into place. That's where my house money went? The silence was answer enough. Get out, I said quietly. James blinked. Mom, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious. I stood, ignoring the protest in my knees. Leave my home. This isn't over, Sandra warned as I opened the door. You're right, I said softly. It's just beginning. After they left, I sat trembling. Standing up to them had cost more than they would ever understand. For years, I'd accepted crumbs of attention, convincing myself they were enough. The fear of losing even those crumbs had kept me obedient, but now I'd crossed a line. There would be consequences, maybe even retaliation. I was frightened, and yet beneath that fear burned a steady flame of resolve. The phone rang. A number I didn't recognize flashed on the screen. Mrs. Walsh? This is Walter Drummond from First Capital Bank. I'm calling about your safety deposit box. There seems to be some confusion. My stomach tightened. What kind of confusion? Your son James came in this morning with a power of attorney document requesting access. The paperwork looked irregular, so I declined and wanted to confirm with you. I gripped the table for support. I never signed a power of attorney. That's what concerned me, Walter said. Can you come to the bank today to review it? An hour later, I sat in Walter's office, staring at a form that bore a convincing but false version of my signature. This is forged, I said, my voice steady despite the quake inside me. I never signed this. Walter nodded gravely. I suspected as much. Mrs. Walsh, you should protect your assets immediately. If they're trying this, there could be other vulnerabilities. I thought of the small inheritance from Henry, carefully preserved in that box. The municipal bonds, my mother's pearls, Henry's pocket watch. What do you recommend? I asked. Before he could answer, his phone rang. He listened, then covered the receiver. It's your son. He's in the lobby, insisting on speaking with me. Something final settled in me. Tell him I'm here, I said. It's time we had an honest conversation. James's confident stride faltered when he saw me in Walter's office. Mom, he managed, voice tight. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "Have you?" I asked calmly. "Or have you been looking for access to my safety deposit box?" Walter rose, his presence commanding. "Mr. Walsh," I explained, "the document appears irregular. Your mother has confirmed she never signed it." James's eyes darted, calculation clear. I recognized that look. The same one when he broke my favorite vase at 7. Took the car without permission at 16. Needed money for his first business at 24? "There's been a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "Mom, remember we discussed this after you had that fall?" "I haven't had any fall," I said quietly. "You were worried about managing your affairs as you get older," he pressed, fabricating a conversation that never happened. Walter's voice hardened. "Mr. Walsh, presenting false legal documents is a serious matter." For a moment, James's polished mask slipped, revealing panic. "I would never. This is ridiculous, Mom. Tell him there's been a mistake." I looked at my son, really looked, at the expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the soft middle, and the choices that had brought us to this room. I noticed the carefully styled hair that barely hid the first signs of thinning, the polished nails, the designer watch. When had my son become this stranger? The kind of man who would forge his own mother's signature. "The only mistake," I said quietly, "was believing you still had any respect for me." James flushed. "That's not fair. I've always what?" I interrupted. "Always remembered my birthday? Always included me in family gatherings? Always been honest about where the money from my house went?" Silence filled the room. "Mrs. Walsh," Walter said gently, "would you like me to call security?" I shook my head. "No, but I do want to make some changes to my account." James stepped forward. "Mom, you're overreacting. Let's discuss this at home." "My home?" I corrected. "My very small apartment. The one I live in because I sold my house to help Elsie. Except that money apparently bought a condo for her in Franklin." Walter cleared his throat. "Mr. Walsh, I need to speak with your mother, privately." "Please step outside." "She's confused," James protested. "She's getting on in years, and sometimes—" "I'm 70, not senile," I said sharply. "And I've never been clearer in my life. Leave now, James, or Mr. Drummond will call security." After a tense pause, James straightened his jacket. "This isn't over," he said. "No," I replied evenly. "It isn't." For the next hour, Walter helped me secure everything. We revoked any access James might have had, updated passwords, and added new security checks. He even recommended a local law firm that specializes in protecting older clients. "Given the attempted forgery, it's wise to be cautious," he advised. I thanked him sincerely. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't called." "I've been a banker for 43 years, he said with a kind smile. "I've seen families at their best and their worst." Sadly, money often brings out the latter. When I finally stepped outside, the city felt louder, brighter, full of possibilities. For years, my world had shrunk to a quiet apartment and rare family visits where I was merely tolerated. Now suddenly I was free. Free from expectations, free from the desperate hope that one day they'd truly see me. Freedom, I realized, could be frightening. My phone rang. Sandra again. I silenced it without hesitation. Instead, I called a number I hadn't dialed in months. "Hello," a warm voice answered. "Helen," I said, my throat catching. "It's Eleanor." "Is your invitation to visit still open?" "My dear friend," she exclaimed, "of course it is. I've kept your room ready for years. When can you come?" For the first time in days, a genuine smile reached my eyes. "How about next week?" I asked. That evening, while I packed a small suitcase for the trip, the doorbell rang. This time it was Elsie. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her expression a practiced blend of hurt and indignation. "Grandma," she began, voice trembling, "we need to talk." I opened the door and stepped aside. Unlike her parents, Elsie at least gave me a quick hug, though it felt more like duty than affection. "Would you like some tea?" I offered. She shook her head. "I can't stay long. I just dash. She drew a breath. "Grandma, Franklin and I had to cancel our honeymoon because of the hotel bill. Dad says you're refusing to help." I studied my granddaughter, remembering the little girl who once colored pictures at my kitchen table while I baked cookies. When had gratitude turned into expectation? "Elsie," I said softly, "do you remember the name tag you gave me at the wedding?" She looked puzzled. "Name tag?" "The one that read, 'The Absent Old Lady.' The one that told me exactly what you all think of me." Her cheeks flushed. "I didn't—" "Please don't lie to me," I interrupted gently. I saw the wedding planner's notes, minimal interaction as requested by the bride's mother. I know I was deliberately sidelined. Elsie sank onto my sofa, her designer purse slipping to the floor. Grandma, you don't understand. Sandra thought --. I understand perfectly, I said, and I've made my decision. The wedding costs are your responsibility, exactly as stated in the contract your father signed. As for the honeymoon, that's a luxury, not a necessity. Perhaps you could use the down payment on the condo your parents bought you. Her eyes widened. How do you know about that? I just learned today, I replied. Apparently that's where the money from my house went. The house I sold to pay for your education. For a moment, Elsie looked genuinely ashamed. Dad said that was an investment we all agreed on. An investment, I repeated softly. Yes, that's the word he used with me, too. Interesting how differently we defined it. A long sigh escaped me, carrying years of exhaustion. Elsie, I'm going away for a while. I need time to decide what comes next. Going away? She glanced at the half-packed suitcase. Where? For how long? I'm not sure, I said truthfully. But I've spent years making myself available to a family that only wanted me when it was convenient. It's time I lived for myself. Her expression hardened, suddenly so much like Sandra's that it startled me. So you're abandoning us when we need you most? The irony almost made me laugh. Instead, I retrieved a well-worn photo album and opened to pages I knew by heart. This is you at 6, I said, pointing to a picture of a gap-toothed Elsie holding a paintbrush. You stayed with me that summer while your parents were separating. Here you are at 12, the Christmas your father was too busy with his new girlfriend to pick you up. And this one, your high school graduation. I sat in the back row because Sandra said there wasn't enough room in the family section. I closed the album gently. I have never abandoned you, Elsie. Not once in 23 years. I can't say the same for any of you. The morning train to Portland clattered steadily across the countryside, each mile placing more distance between me and a family that had treated me as an afterthought. I'd left before dawn with no forwarding address, no note. For once they would know what it felt like to reach for someone who simply wasn't there. My phone buzzed again and again, calls from James, Sandra, Elsie, even Franklin. I silenced it, imagining them huddled around a phone, strategizing how to regain control. I turned the device off and slipped it into my purse. Helen was waiting at the Portland station, silver hair shining in the late morning sun, arms open wide. We embraced like the lifelong friends we were, tears mingling with laughter. Let me look at you, she said, holding me at arm's length. Still elegant as ever, but thinner. Have you been eating properly? I laughed. Always the mother hen. Someone has to be, she replied, linking her arm through mine as we walked in the car. Helen's cottage sat on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, white clapboard with blue shutters and a garden alive with late summer blooms. It was every bit as lovely as she'd described in her letters. It's beautiful, I said, carrying my suitcase inside. It's peaceful, Helen corrected, setting a kettle on the stove. Exactly what you need right now. Over tea and warm scones, I told her everything. The wedding, the name tag, the forged paperwork, the confrontations. Helen listened without a single interruption, her face moving from shock to outrage to quiet sorrow. Oh, Eleanor, she sighed when I finished. I always feared James was too influenced by Sandra, but this is beyond anything I imagined. I enabled it, I admitted. For years I made excuses, told myself they were busy, that family changes as children grow. I convinced myself that being occasionally remembered was better than being completely forgotten. Helen reached across the table, her hand warm over mine. What will you do now? I looked out the window, watching gulls wheel against a bright blue sky. I'm not sure, I said, but for the first time in decades, I'm making choices just for me. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. That evening, Helen and I sat on her deck as the sunset spread pink and gold across the horizon. The rhythm of the waves against the rocks below was hypnotic, a quiet heartbeat from the ocean. I've been thinking, Helen said, breaking our comfortable silence. My neighbor Irene runs the local art center. They're looking for someone to teach beginner watercolor classes a few afternoons a week. Mostly retirees and summer visitors. I haven't painted in years, I admitted. But you were good, Eleanor, she reminded me. Remember that summer in Provence after Henry passed? Your landscapes caught something special. The light, the calm. I smiled at the memory. After Henry's sudden death, when grief threatened to swallow me, Helen had convinced me to join her on that painting retreat in southern France. 2 weeks of lavender fields and quiet village squares had saved me once. And I'm not sure I remember how, I said. It's like riding a bicycle, she laughed. No, besides, the position pays. Not much, but enough to add to your social security. And you can stay here as long as you like. Helen, I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, she insisted. This house is too big for one person. I've missed having my best friend around. Stay a week, a month. No pressure, no expectations. Those words washed over me like a blessing. 2 days later, an email arrived from Walter Drummond at the bank. James had returned, this time with Sandra, insisting there'd been a misunderstanding about the power of attorney. When Walter explained that I had left town indefinitely, they demanded to know where I was. He refused to tell them. I wanted to warn you, his email concluded. They seemed determined to locate you. I smiled to myself, imagining their family emergency, no doubt the hotel bill or some new financial crisis. That afternoon, I met Irene at the Art Center, a bright converted boathouse overlooking the harbor. Light streamed through tall windows, reflecting off jars of brushes and stacks of watercolor paper. Helen speaks highly of your talent, Irene said as she gave me a tour. We've had a surge of interest in our beginner classes, but our current instructor is overwhelmed. I've never taught, I confessed. I'm not sure I'd be any good. Do you love painting? She asked. Yes, I answered without hesitation. Can you explain how to mix colors, how to hold a brush, how to see the world as shapes and light? I thought of the afternoons spent teaching little Elsie to paint, guiding her small hand across the page. Yes, I said, I can do that. Then you can teach, Irene declared. Start next Tuesday with the morning group. They're mostly retirees, very forgiving of first-time instructors. As we finalized details, my phone rang. I had finally turned it back on. Elsie's name flashed across the screen. Hello, Elsie. Grandma. Her voice was tight. Where are you? We've been worried sick. Dad says you emptied your accounts and disappeared. He thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. I laughed softly, the sound carried away on the salt breeze. I'm not having a breakdown, Elsie. I'm finally putting myself first. But what about the family? What about the hotel bill? Or is there another financial emergency I'm supposed to solve? I finished for her. Her silence said everything. Elsie, I said gently, do you remember when I taught you to paint at 6 years old? What does that have to do with anything? She asked, frustration sharp. Everything, I replied. I've just accepted a position teaching watercolor at an art center. I'll be staying here for a while. Where is here? She demanded. I looked out at the harbor, the boats rocking gently, the gulls circling in the late afternoon sun. A deep calm settled over me. Somewhere I'm respected, I said simply. Somewhere I belong. Autumn arrived in coastal Maine, dressed in crimson and gold. 3 peaceful months had passed since I stepped away from my old life. Mornings began with sunrise over the Atlantic. Afternoons were spent teaching eager students how to capture light and shadow in watercolor. Evenings found Helen and me on her deck, sharing wine and memories beneath a star-filled sky. My modest salary covered my needs, leaving my savings untouched. For the first time in decades, my life and my choices belonged entirely to me. I had opened a new account at a small local bank, moving every dollar from the city. Walter helped me secure my finances so thoroughly that James could never again reach them. Weeks passed. Calls from my family slowed but grew sharper. James left clipped, angry voicemails. Sandra tried a sweeter tone, leaving messages about how everyone missed me, how Elsie was suffering without her grandmother's guidance. Only Elsie sounded genuinely worried, but even her concern carried a note of self-interest. Whenever I answered, I kept the conversation short and vague. Each one ended the same way. When would I come to my senses and return to settle the wedding bill? Late one Tuesday in October, Helen entered the kitchen, her face troubled. You might want to see that, she said, handing me the local newspaper. There in the real estate section, a small ad caught my eye. Historic Maine cottage for sale. Ideal vacation or retirement home. Lovingly maintained for generations, with original details and breathtaking ocean views. Contact Walsh Properties for details. Below the text was a photo of my parents' old summer cottage, the one they'd left solely to me, the one I had carefully maintained for decades, though I rarely visited. The cottage I had nearly forgotten I owned. My hands trembled. This isn't possible. I never authorized this. That property is in my name alone. Helen's concerned gaze met mine. Walsh Properties, she read quietly. James's company. I immediately phoned my bank. Walter was out, but his assistant promised a quick call back. Next, I contacted the county clerk where the cottage was located. I need to verify the current ownership of the property, I explained, giving the address. After a brief hold, the clerk returned. According to our records, ownership transferred 3 weeks ago to Walsh Properties, LLC. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. I'm Eleanor Walsh, the sole owner. I never signed any transfer. Ma'am, the clerk said carefully, the deed transfer here appears fully executed. Your signature, witnessed and notarized. Another forgery. This time, unlike the power of attorney attempt, it had succeeded. When Walter finally called back, his voice was grave. Mrs. Walsh, I meant to reach you today. There have been some concerning developments. I told him what I'd discovered. He sighed. I feared this. Your son came in last month with what looked like transfer documents for a main property. Since it wasn't tied to your accounts, and everything appeared in order, I had no reason to question it. You couldn't have known, I said quietly. But I need your help again. That afternoon, I sat in the office of Patricia Winters, an elder law attorney Walter recommended. After reviewing my documents and listening to the entire story, her expression hardened. What they've done is illegal, she said firmly. Forgery, fraud, and elder financial abuse. We can fight this. Will it be expensive? I asked, already calculating my limited resources. Patricia offered a determined smile. Normally, yes. But in this case, I believe we can work with the district attorney's office. Given the pattern, the forged power of attorney, now this property theft, they may take action. I don't want my son to go to jail, I said reflexively, startled by the words as they left my mouth. After everything James had done, a part of me still wanted to protect him. Patricia's gaze softened. That's not unusual, she said gently. Many of my clients feel the same conflict. They want justice, but they can't help loving their children, even when those children have betrayed them. Patricia laid out the plan with quiet precision. Our first step is a cease and desist letter for the property listing, she said. We'll demand immediate restoration of the deed and make it clear that failure to comply will lead to criminal charges. That evening, I sat on Helen's desk, a tumbler of whiskey warming my hands as the autumn air turned crisp. The sky blazed pink and gold over the Atlantic. What's on your mind? Helen asked, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. Second chances, I said softly, and whether some wounds can ever truly heal. Are you doubting the legal fight? Not doubting, I answered. Look, just realizing something. I spent years inventing a family in my head, a family that valued me, one that would never betray me. But the family I've been mourning never existed. I was grieving a fantasy, not reality. The next morning, my phone rang with a familiar but unexpected voice. Eleanor, Franklin began without greeting. This has gone far enough. You need to call off your lawyer. Hello to you too, I replied calmly. I assume this is about the cottage. It's just an old house you never visit, he said. James planned to develop it. The profits would benefit the whole family. The whole family, I repeated. You mean the way the money from my house was supposed to pay for Elsie's education before it funded your condo? That's ancient history, Franklin snapped. No one wants a public legal fight. It would damage the family's reputation. Ah, there it was. The real fear, scandal. If James returns the property and stops trying to access my accounts, I'll consider dropping the matter, I offered. That's not reasonable, he shot back. We already have interested buyers and contracts in progress. Then you've invested in something that was stolen, I said evenly. My answer is final. Return what's mine or face the consequences. I hung up, an unfamiliar sensation rising, something between laughter and triumph. For 70 years I'd been the peacemaker, the one who bent to keep harmony. No more. Patricia's strategy worked faster than either of us expected. Within 48 hours, the listing vanished. 3 days later, legal papers confirmed the transfer reversed. The cottage was once again solely mine. They blinked, Patricia said with a satisfied smile. They knew they couldn't win. I should have felt victorious. Instead, a quiet emptiness settled in. The property was back in my name, but the last illusion, that my family might someday change, was gone forever. That evening, I made one final call. Grandma? Elsie answered, her voice carefully neutral. Are you finally coming home? No, Elsie, I said gently. I'm calling to say goodbye. A sharp intake of breath. What do you mean, goodbye? I mean that, after 70 years of giving everything, my home, my savings, my time, my love, and receiving so little in return, I'm choosing myself. Because of the cottage? She asked, disbelief in her tone. We apologized. Dad made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, I said quietly. It was a deliberate attempt to steal what was mine, just like the forged power of attorney was deliberate. Grandma, please. I've made my decision. I've instructed my attorney to update my will. The cottage, my savings, everything I own will go to the local art center here in Maine. They're creating a scholarship fund for young artists who can't afford training. Silence stretched across the line. So that's it? She finally asked, her voice small. You're erasing us from your life? I closed my eyes, letting the weight of her question settle. No, Elsie. You erased me from yours long ago. I'm simply acknowledging what already exists. After we hung up, I walked to the rocky shore. Waves crashed against the coastline, the air crisp with salt and pine. Stars emerged one by one, eternal and unchanging. For the first time in years, I smiled. A real smile, warm and unguarded. Not the polite mask I'd worn at Elsie's wedding, but a true smile that reached my eyes. I was free.